Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another episode in Palette Week. I hope that you guys are enjoying all the palette themed content thus far. If you guys have any palette themed content you would like to see from me, leave me a comment down below. I always want to shout that out. I've gotten some of my favorite video ideas from you guys in the comments, so if you have any palette themed content that you would like to see, definitely leave me a comment below and I would love to film anything about palettes for you guys. Today's video is going to be the if I could only choose one palette tag. I believe this started last year. I can't remember who the original creator was, but I will definitely leave them and their video link down below, as well as other videos that I can find that are like the same theme in case you like the style of video and want to see more. I also did this video, I believe, last year, so I'll leave my old video link down below and we can kind of, or if you want to compare like last year's to this year's, definitely check that video out. But we're going to be going through my entire palette collection. Any brand that I own two or more palettes from, I will tell you what palettes I own from them, and then I will also tell you which palette I would choose if I could only keep one palette from the brand. So if you guys are interested in this video, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel, I would love if you would consider subscribing before moving on. We talk a lot about eyeshadow palettes here on this channel, and I also love project panning, so if you like those things, I would love to have you here. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into the video. Alright, I had to add a little gloss to the lips. Currently sipping on a Good & Gather Lime Sparkling Water. Do you guys like sparkling water? What's your favorite brand? What's your favorite flavor? There's so many sparkling water brands out there now. I'm not even really a huge sparkling water fan. I just go through phases where I really want it. I feel like my camera does not want to stay focused on my face today. Hopefully it will throughout this video. I also feel like my camera's a little lopsided, but we're just gonna roll with it. It is what it is. I'm going to try and go in alphabetical-ish order. So we're going to start with ABH. I believe I have 11 palettes from ABH. So from ABH, I have the Master Palette by Mario. This is a favorite. I absolutely love this one. You guys know I've raved about this many times on my channel. I also have Modern Renaissance, Soft Glam, Norvina, Subculture. I have Prism. I have Riviera, I have ABH Amrezy, ABH Carly, ABH Sultry, and the ABH Jackie, which you guys know would be the palette I would choose if I could only choose one. This is just an absolute staple in my collection. I'm sorry about the noisy traffic outside. This is just an absolute staple in my collection. This palette is so versatile. It definitely would be between this, Sultry, and Soft Glam. I really love all three of them, and honestly this is probably the one that's gotten the least use out of the three for me, and I think I find myself reserving using this palette for special occasions. Just it's stupid just because I love it so much and I'm like worried I'm going to use a shade up, which is just ridiculous. I should just use this palette before it gets old. But I love that you have the versatility of like purples and pinks, and then you also have your neutrals. You have a beautiful green shade, which you guys know I'm all about greens. These two shades, Zam and Soleil, are just so stunning. It's such a good palette. I did see that ABH is doing a vault collection. I'm not sure if it will still be available when this video goes live, but it was like a holiday vault with the Jackie palette in one of the vaults, which I thought was super exciting. So if you're looking to get your hands on it, and if I can find it to link, it'll be linked down below for you guys. I'll also link my top palettes for each brand down below, so if you guys are interested in any of my top palettes, definitely check those links out. My hair always bothers me so much when I wear it down, which is why I always have it in a ponytail. Moving on to Colourpop. I do own 6 palettes from Colourpop. My Colourpop collection has grown a little bit this year as I've been more and more interested in some of their releases. I'm not on like the Colourpop hate train like I know so many are, but the palettes I own, so I own the Dream Street palette, which I believe was the palette I selected last year for this tag. I do love this palette. I think it's beautiful. It has some stunning and unique shades in my opinion. I really like the rose gold shades, as well as this shade in, I think, Kaleidoscope down here. I think is absolutely beautiful. I do have a pan in this palette. I think it's stunning. I also have the Baby Got Peach palette, which has some pans in it. I have 3 pans in this palette. Mine might look a little bit different. My shades fill out and I was too lazy to put them back in the correct order. So also have that one. And then most recently I have picked up these 4 this year. So I have the Going Coconuts palette, which looks like this. have the Taupe palette, which looks like this, also very beautiful. I have the She's Got Solstice palette. And then finally, for my selection, if I could only keep one, I would keep the Lil Ray of Sunshine palette. This was just an outstanding release from them this year, in my opinion. It's an all matte palette, so beautiful for the fall time. All of the tones in here just like, make me want to drool. I think that the theme with like the sunflowers is just also so perfect for this palette. I really can't say any of the shades in this palette are like duds for me. I think all of the shades are beautiful. I really love this like daffodil sunflower. I really like this yellow right here, as well as like these two like more grungy mustard shades. I have just so enjoyed all of the looks that I have created with this palette. I also enjoyed the Super Shocks that came with this one, and if I could only keep one Colourpop palette, it would definitely be this one. Next, moving on to Dominique Cosmetics. I only own 2 palettes from Dominique Cosmetics. I have the Latte palette, which is this one right here, basically a neutral tone lover's dream with a couple pops of color. And I also own the Rustic Glam palette, looks like this. You guys know the Rustic Glam was a bit of a disappointing palette to me, so if I could only choose one, I would definitely go with the Latte. I think that the quality in the Latte palette is absolutely outstanding, very easy to work with, really, really pigmented. The shimmers are super metallic and super foiled, so if you like more of a subtle shimmer, you probably wouldn't like the shimmers in this palette. I still think the mattes are really nice, but if you like a really metallic shimmer that you don't have to work hard for, I definitely recommend this palette. I'm still interested in picking up the Latte too, but I have yet to pick that one up. But I can't recommend this one enough, especially if you just need like a really simple palette that like for the most part is just like for every day, but then you can really amp up your look for like the weekends or nights out. When we get out of this weird time that we're in and we actually do go out, I just think this is a great palette. So definitely the one I would keep from Dominique Cosmetics. Next up we have Dose of Colors. I do own 4 of the Dose of Colors 5-pan palettes. You guys know these are like favorites of mine within my collection. These are so nice for just easy travel, easy use. So I have Sassy Siennas, which is a beautiful like warm tone bronze with, or warm tone brown with a pop of coral. I also have Marvelous Mauves, beautiful mauve tone palette. I have Blushing Berries, which is a really beautiful, more like sultry red toned palette. I own Baked Browns, really beautiful brown tone palette, just neutral browns, super easy to work with. And if I could only choose one, it's my same answer from last year. I would definitely choose the Dose of Colors Desi Katie Friendcation palette. I just love this palette. This is one of my favorites in my collection. This palette is just so versatile, and you can create so many different looks with this palette pending what colors you pair together. You can layer the shimmers to create different colors. You can use this as just a really simple neutral palette. It's just so versatile, so easy to use. Such a good formula, very unique in my collection, and one that I would be really sad to have, like to not have in my collection. So absolutely, if I could only keep one palette from Dose of Colors, I would keep my Desi Katie Friendcation. Okay, I knew I would make a mistake in like the alphabetical order, and I already did. I forgot I own 2 Charlotte Tilbury quads now. I own the Exaggerized quad, which is this one right here. This has 1 matte shade and 3 shimmers. And I also own the Pillow Talk Pops, what is this? Luxury Palette of Pops in Pillow Talk, which is 4 shimmer shades. I really enjoy both of them. I will say that you're not gonna have like the most intense pop of shimmer from this. So like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. But I do think the shimmers in both palettes, give a really beautiful sort of glossy look to the eyes. But if I could only choose one from these 2, I would go with the Exaggerize. This one looks pretty boring when you're just looking at the quad. And to be honest with you, with quads, I don't mind if they're boring-esque, because oftentimes if I'm reaching into a quad, it's just to do a really quick, simple, easy look for running errands or going to work or whatever it might be. But this is beautiful, and you really can create just a simple look with this, but I love this shade right here. So it doesn't really have a base to it, and this swatch isn't really going to do it justice. I must be swatching over, I have something else glossy on my hands. On the eyes, this shade just looks like the most beautiful, wet, glossy eyeshadow, like off-duty model for sure. And on its own, like, I just love this shadow as like a one shadow and done look. But with this, you can also create like a really nice everyday look. Pop this in the crease, kind of blend it all over the eye, and then choose a shimmer or a couple shimmers. I have this shade right here in my inner corner today. I think it's a really beautiful inner corner highlight. So if I had to choose one, I would choose the Exaggerize. This is nice because it does have that matte where I don't feel like I would get as much use out of the palette of pops. Yes, I can pair this with other looks and use this to, like, as a complementary palette, but I'm not really ever reaching into this one just on its own. So whereas I am with this, I can create an everyday look with this. So if I had to choose one, I would go with the Exaggerize over the palette of pops. All right, next up we have Huda Beauty. You guys know I love Huda eyeshadows for the most part. I have a lot of Huda eyeshadows. I have done ranking my Huda eyeshadows on my channel. I'll leave that link down below. I only have 2 of her larger palettes, and then I have a bunch of her little palettes. All right, so I currently own or still have 4 of the original Obsessions palettes. I have Warm Browns. I have Coral Obsessions, which I love, especially for vacation. I have Gemstone. I'm going to be careful when I open this because one of my shades did break. I have the Gemstone Obsessions. I also have Smoky Obsessions. You guys know I am obsessed with my Smoky Obsessions. I also picked up one from her Neon line. I picked up the Neon Orange palette. Looks like this. I picked up 2 of the mini nudes. So I have the Nude Medium. Looks like this. As well as the Nude Rich. Very beautiful. Most recently, I picked up 2 of her palettes from her Haze collection. So I picked up Sand Haze as well as Khaki Haze. And then most recently, I picked up the Naughty palette. Oh my gosh, I can't open this. Looks like this. And if I could only choose one Huda palette, my answer has changed from last year. I believe I chose the Smoky palette last year, but I'm going with Mercury Retrograde this year. I've always loved this palette. I talk about this, every time I talk about this palette, I mention this, but like, I am the type of person who just thrives with change, thrives in chaos. Like, if there's not chaos in my life, I'm just like bored and just not having it. So like, Mercury Retrograde, which is known as a more chaotic time, like my life, constant Mercury Retrograde, or I'm bored. So this palette just like, it fits my brand, if you will. This is what the palette looks like. I love that with this palette, I mean, if you don't like mauve tone looks, I feel like this might not be a great palette for you. This is a very expensive palette, but you can do like neutral mauve toned looks with this. But obviously the stars of the show for me are all of the different finishes with the like metallic shimmery shades. Every shade I just feel like has a unique finish to it, and it's just so beautiful. I've had so much fun playing around with these 3 shades specifically, but even like these bottom shimmers I just love. I would be so sad to not have this palette in my collection because I really do think that this adds something to my collection that I don't have. And if I could only choose one Huda palette, I would be sad because I love Huda Beauty eyeshadows so much. I just love how convenient the little Obsessions palettes are. But truly, if I could only choose one right now, it would be the Mercury Retrograde from Huda. All right, we are on to the letter J, and we have Juvia's Place. I only own 3 palettes from Juvia's Place. I've decluttered a few Juvia's Place palettes this year. I like the Juvia's Place formula, but I'm not as diehard as some people, and I'm also, just because of the color scheme and like my personal preferences, I just wasn't using some of the other palettes that I previously owned. The ones that I still own the Magic palette, and I have the huge one. I do like this palette, especially as like a complementary palette if I want to do something more colorful. I'll reach into this just to like top it with one of the shimmer shades. I'm not a huge fan of the darker mattes in this palette, so I don't reach for this palette all that often. I also have the Deuce palette, which used to be like a fave of mine. Not reaching into this one as much anymore, but I still like this one for the shimmers as well. It's really Juvia's shimmers that I love. And then the one that I would keep if I could only keep one, shockingly I would actually keep this one for both the shimmers and the mattes, but this is the Nubian Mini. It has 3 shimmers and 3 mattes, and this is just so easy to reach into if I am like needing to run out the door and just need something super quick, easy, simple. The shimmers are super foiled in this. I think that they are beautiful. I also think that the mattes perform really, really well. I love these little palettes as well. I've just been really into like more consolidated, concise, smaller palettes. I recently did ranking all of my like mini palettes too, so if you guys want to see that, I'll leave that linked for you, but I would definitely keep the Nubian Mini because this one is the one that definitely gets the most use out of all of my Juvia's palettes. For the letter K, I have Kaleidos, and I actually own 4 palettes from Kaleidos. I am so impressed with the Kaleidos formula, and I want to own all of the Kaleidos palettes, and anything that they release I will be interested in. I'm definitely getting more and more into wanting to support indie brands and having fun testing out different indie brands and different indie formulas. So the 4 palettes that I own from Kaleidos, I did get the Escape Pod. This was the first palette that I picked up from them, and I was just so impressed with the formula, both of the mattes and shimmers, for such colorful pigmented shades. I felt like the mattes performed really, really well, and I really enjoy this palette. I love this row of shimmer shades too, just so fun and unique. I also picked up the Sashimi City palette, which looks like this. This is really nice if you want to try Kaleidos, but maybe don't play around as much with color. This is really nice because it obviously is very neutral toned, and the 2 shimmers in here, oh my gosh, this shimmer right here, you guys, I have had so much caffeine today and no like food and only a little bit of water. My hands are like legit shaking. This shimmer, I just think it's not going to even do it justice on camera. It is so beautiful. It has I don't know if you can see my hand shaking. It's like ridiculous. Yikes, I need to go eat after this. This is bad. Normally caffeine doesn't affect me that much. This is so beautiful. It doesn't really have a base to it, and it has this beautiful like green shimmer running through it. You guys know I have a thing for greens, so I've really been enjoying this Sashimi City. The packaging on Kaleidos products as well, similar to like Nabla Cosmetics, you can just tell they put a lot of thought and effort into their packaging, which I really appreciate. I also picked up the Lunar Lavender. I love purple tones, especially like lavenders. I've been really into this year. This is what this one looks like. I was so excited for this one, specifically for this shade. It's so pretty. Again, not really a base to this, but oh, unique shimmer is just super beautiful. Love this one as well. But if I could only keep one from Kaleidos, it would actually be the Futurism 3 Astro Pink. And the reason I decided to go with this one is because I can do, so I was going to choose the Lunar Lavender, but I decided to go with this one because it offers me like blue and purple options. But if I'm just needing to like run out the door for work, I can use either of these 2 mattes in my crease to just do like a one shadow and done. I love a good cool tone shade for a one shadow and done look, and I can get that from either of these 2. But then if I want to play around with like a fun shimmer, I also have that option within this palette. So if I could only choose one, I would definitely choose the Futurism 3. Look at the packaging. It's just like mainstream brands, take note. For the letter L, I have Lawless Beauty. I only own 2 palettes from Lawless, and I bet you guys already know which palette I'm going to choose. So I own the Lawless the One Palette, which looks like this. You guys know I was not impressed with this palette. I felt like there was a lot of duds in here, and there wasn't really anything that like I felt like was amazing. Maybe the shade Obsessed, but like this is a $65 eyeshadow palette. I was expecting to like more than like one shade. That's not to say I like despise this palette, but like the shade Casual, I got hard pan right away. This pink shade, I got hard pan right away after using it. This shade, like a lot of the mattes, it was like instant hard pan, and I felt like the mattes were really dry as well. I was just very unimpressed with the one, so I wasn't expecting expecting to really enjoy the baby one, but it became available on my Octoly store, and I was like, I'm gonna give it a try because I was, or have been, really into mauve tones lately. This is so much better than this. This is, I believe, $25 for the 8 pans, which I get can be expensive, but I think it's worth it if you like these tones. I keep mentioning this is the one shade that I really don't use because I don't use red tones, but everything else I think is really nice. Blends really nice together. It doesn't give you any sort of like muddy look. Like, I just feel like it's just so much better than this one. The shimmers in this palette, this one is so beautiful, very, very foiled, gives a very intense effect even without a wet brush. This one is definitely a little bit more subtle, so if you like a subtle shimmer on your eyes, I think you would really enjoy this. I personally like to use this as an inner corner highlight, but I think this is a stunning palette. I'm very happy to have this in my collection. If for some reason I lost this, I would repurchase this because, again, I've been really into these smaller palettes, and I think that this one is really good. Alrighty, moving on to the letter M. I do currently own 2 of the quads by Makeup by Mario. I picked up the Rose Glam quad, which looks like this, very beautiful. Rosy Glam, I apologize. And then I also picked up the Bronzy Glam, which looks like this. I think both quads are beautiful. The shimmers in his quads are outstanding in my opinion. Super foiled, super intense, super metallic, even without a wet brush. It was really hard for me to decide between these two because honestly, I can see myself getting a ton of use out of both of these, but if I could only choose one, I would go with the Bronzy Glam just because I feel like I would get more use out of this, especially on a day-to-day. Just thinking about the looks that I typically do. I do a lot of like neutral brown looks, and you guys know how much I love greens. This shade right here, oh, it's like the most beautiful, like bronzy green gold shade. This is a little bit deep if I were to just use this matte shade, but it blends really easily. I actually used it a little bit in my look today just to really deepen up the outer like edges, outer part of my crease. And then this makes a beautiful all over lid shade or a absolutely stunning inner corner highlight, and this is just a really beautiful true bronze shade. Again, I think both are great, but I feel like I'll get more use out of this one, so if I could only choose one, I would go with Bronzy Glam from Makeup by Mario. Sticking with the letter M, we have Melt Cosmetics. I love all 3 of my Melt palettes. You guys know I wasn't a huge fan of the Melt Smoke Sessions palette last year when I first got this, but after adding the Melt Gemini to my collection, I really found a newfound love for this palette. I think that the shimmers are just so beautiful, and these 2 pair really nicely together. If I could only choose one though, I would go with the Melt Rust palette just because this is something that every day I would get more use out of. This palette, again with Melt Cosmetics, I love the attention to detail with their palettes. It was really hard for me to choose between this and the Melt Gemini, but would I pick the Melt? Actually, you know what, you guys? If I could only choose one, it would be the Melt Gemini because I would want these greens. I would. We all know I love greens on this channel. Alright, what was I thinking there? I would go with the Melt Gemini. I also like the flowers on this. I love this palette. I love all my Melt palettes, but if I could only choose one, this would be a really tough one because I also really like the shimmers in here. Green shimmers. Just love. I just don't love the mattes in here. So, yeah, if I could only choose one, we're keeping the Gemini. My husband's a Gemini. I mean, I would keep the Gemini. All right, we are moving on to the letter N. I have my Natasha Denona palettes. I recently did a ranking my Natasha Denona palettes video. I'll leave that link down below to you guys. There's gonna be a lot of palette content linked below. So you guys know I own 5 of the mini palettes. I own, my hands are so shaky. I own Mini Star, Mini Nude, Mini Gold, Mini Glam, Mini Retro. I own the midi size in the Sunrise palette, which looks like this. Very beautiful. I own the Lila palette, my first Natasha Denona palette. I own the gold palette. is so beautiful. And then most recently, this was not in my collection when I recently did that ranking, I have the Biba palette, which looks like this. So in my ranking, I don't mean to spoil it for you, but I did rank my Natasha Denona Gold as my #1. And to be honest with you, when it came to keeping one of these two, it really did come down to either the Biba. Let me grip this better, especially with my shaky hands. It came down to the Biba or the Gold, but truly, if I had to choose one, I would keep the Gold. And I know I feel like you probably get more variety from the Biba, but I couldn't be without these two like green shades. I just love the variety of tones in the browns in this palette. I love this sort of like topper slash shifter shade. I just love this palette so freaking much. So if I could only choose one Natasha palette, I'm keeping the Gold. Next up we have Nabla Cosmetics, which is another sort of indie-ish brand. I know they're sold at Ulta now, but another brand that I've really come to like really enjoy their eyeshadow formula, and definitely want to be picking more up in the future. So I currently own 3 Nabla palettes. I did used to own the Garden palette as well. I was not a fan of that palette, so I did declutter that. But currently I own the Dreamy 2, which is such a beautiful palette. When I first started using this palette, I really didn't think that I was gonna love it. I felt kind of stuck in what I wanted to create, but every time I reach into this palette and start creating a look, I just get more and more inspired, and I always love the looks that I create. I do currently have 2 pans in this palette, this one and this one. I love this palette. I think it's beautiful. Most recently, I picked up one of their cutie palettes because, so this is a Wildberry palette. This has the shade Alchemy 2.0, and I just have been wanting to try the Alchemy single for so long. I decided I would just pick this up for Alchemy 2.0, and I really do enjoy this palette as well. I think it's beautiful. The Alchemy shade just is so stunning. I don't think it'll even pick up on camera. It like never... I just feel like it can't do it justice. It's such a beautiful, beautiful shade. It really doesn't have a base to it. And again, it just makes your eyes look wet. I've used this as just a single like one and done shadow, and I love the effect. But if I had to choose just one palette from Nabla to keep, I would keep my Secret palette. Reason being, I feel like I really get such a good variety in this palette. If I want to do mauve tones, I have this mauve toned row. If I want to play around with color, I have the middle row. And if I want to do like a neutral brown look, I have this bottom row. I feel like you're getting a good mix of the like different formulas and different finishes that Nabla has to offer within this palette. You have this beautiful green shifter shade. I also love this one. This is in the shade Play Hard, and truly like whatever you put this over kind of depends, like you're gonna get a different look pending what you put this over. Again, doesn't really have much of a base to it. It can pull green, it can pull blue. It's so beautiful. I also really love the top mauve toned row. I think it's beautiful. I'm currently working on panning the shade Contigo. This shade, Creation Crown, is such an intense gold. Like, it's so intense. I'm not really into like a pure gold like this, but again, I would have that option. I also really love Hyper Sensual, is a really beautiful shade. Again, doesn't have much of a base to it, but it's just, pending what you pair this with, oh, look at that. It just looks straight up glossy and wet. So if I could only keep one from Nabla, it would definitely be the Secret palette. Whew, this is getting to be a long video. Next up, we have the letter P, and I have Persona Cosmetics. I own both of her palettes, both the Identity and the Identity 2. This is what the Identity 2 looks like. And this is the Identity, which would hands down be the one that I keep. I love the Identity palette. I know it doesn't look like the most like creatively fun palette, but I just love this one. You have a mix of cool tones, you have some warm tones, and it's truly the shimmers in this one that steal the show. They're so foiled and metallic, but they're also really, really smooth, so they never look kind of like, sometimes I can get like, my eyes just look like older, or they look like a little bit crepey. things just sit weird on my eyes, and I never get that with these shimmers. My favorite shade in this one is this one, which is in Bombshell, which is this really beautiful, like kind of satin shade, but if it hits the light right, it kind of looks like it has like a bit of a green shift to it. So you guys know I love it. I reach into Humble all of the time if I'm just like running out the door and need like a quick one and done matte shadow in the crease, and I just think this is such a great palette. I know that they've recently repackaged this to be in the harder plastic, but I just can't recommend this enough. I love both of the Persona palettes, but this is definitely the one that I reach into more and would absolutely keep if I could only keep one. All right, next we have Pat McGrath. My Pat collection has grown a bit. Most recently, I have picked up 2 of her quads. I wasn't going to pick up any quads, and then I just couldn't talk myself out of it. So I have the blue one, which is in, oh gosh, I don't remember what this is called. Shade Throwing in Eye Ecstasy. I don't remember. I have the one with the blue shimmer. It's beautiful. I love it. I also have the one that is exclusive to Pat's website. Looks like this. Has the beautiful lavender shade. This is a, I'll have to show you guys. Oh, it's so stunning. It's just such a cool shade. I mean, we all know Pat can make some pretty cool shades, and this does not disappoint. So I really do love both of those quads. Again, I've been getting into smaller, more condensed palettes. I also picked up the Rose Decadence palette this year. Looks like this. At first I wasn't like super hyped on this, but I have come to like this one more than when I first got it. You aren't getting any of the Pat special shades in this, but her foiled metallics are still very, very intense, and I absolutely love this. I love all of the shimmery shades. They're beautiful. This one isn't. This one's a little bit chunky, and you can get some fallout with this one. I still like it. These 2 shimmers are outstanding, and oh, I always forget about the gold too. The gold is just so beautiful, and this is one that too I would wear all over my eyes. It's not as intense as the one from like the Persona, not the Persona, the Nabla palette. So this one is also stunning, and I did come to like this a lot more than when I originally was trying it out. The first palette that I got from Pat was this one, which was a holiday release a couple of years ago. This one was a bit of a letdown. I wasn't that impressed with this blue shade. These 3 shimmers, beautiful, and I do really like the mattes. I was just super excited about this blue shade, and this one was a little bit disappointing. I still like this palette. I still want this palette in my collection. This red shade has like a red-green shift. It is a really, really cool shade, and it's something that kind of, I don't know if it'll even catch. Sometimes I can get it, sometimes I can't. This is what did turn me on to wanting to try it more from Pat, although I was disappointed in that blue shade. But if I could only keep one palette, you guys, you already know it's going to be my largest palette from Pat, the Mothership 5 Bronze Seduction palette. Looks like this. I don't know that I could recommend this for the $125. It's just so expensive. If you can get this on sale, which occasionally Pat runs sales on her website, occasionally we have the Sephora VIB sales, I would recommend picking it up on a discount. I do think the mattes are good. The matte formula is definitely, obviously, I don't think why Pat sells her palettes. It's truly for the special shades. This gold shade might be my favorite gold in my entire collection. It just blends a look together, or it blends in a way that just completes a look. Like if you are trying to use a shimmer shade and you just feel like it's not quite blending into like your matte the way you want it to, I always just jump into this and pop this on, and for some reason it just always pulls a look together. I mean, these 3 shades, or this kind of quad, it's a beautiful palette, and if I could only keep one from Pat, I'd be sad because I spent so much money on everything. But it would be the Bronze Seduction. I did pick up 2 Rowan quads this year. I have the 1111 as well as the 75 Degrees palette. Rowan Quads, the Rowan Quads I'm just a huge fan of. The formula is really unique, not like anything I have in my collection. I do think the NYX Foil Play Cream Shadows are really similar to this, so if you don't want to spend the $42, I'd recommend checking out the NYX Foil Play Cream Shadows and see if there's a couple of shades that you like. Those would be the closest dupes that I have found to the Rowan Quads. If I could only choose one to keep, it would be this one, just because I really love the color story of this, although this one is really nice too when you're doing like a neutral brown look. Both of them I love. I'd be really sad to give one up, but this color story just speaks to me a little bit more. I'm not trying to blind you. Just speaks to me a little bit more than the 75 degrees. So if I could only choose one, it would be the 1111. I definitely haven't been as into Tarte as I once was, but I do still own 3 palettes from Tarte. Still interested in potentially picking up the Tartelette in Bloom again at some point, because that was just a staple favorite of mine. But I own the Tarte Love, Trust, and Fairy Dust, which is a really beautiful mauve tone palette. I also own the Tarteist, the Tarteist Pro Palette. Looks like this. This one's really, really nice if you aren't maybe like the most creatively in tune. I hope that's not like an offensive way to put it. If you just like don't want to think about your makeup, don't want to think about creating a look, this is nice because you can just like follow the rules to create a look, which is really nice for me sometimes because I'm like, I don't know what I want to create. And then I also own the Tarte Unleashed palette, which looks like this, and if I could only keep one, it would be this one, just because I love the range that this one offers. I really like a lot of the foiled shadows in here. This is the only shade that really turned out to be a dud for me. It's in the shade Hawkward. I thought it was going to be a beautiful like greeny shade, but it just is like a chunky mess in a way. But the mauve tone row I'm never disappointed with. I also think that the 2 orange shades are really pigmented. These 2 blue shades also perform really nicely, and I love the like champagne shimmers in here. So if I could only choose one from Tarte, it would be the Unleashed palette. I also still own 3 palettes from Too Faced. I own the Palm Springs Dream palette. Why am I struggling to open everything? This is what this one looks like. This one actually is really beautiful. I really like the majority of the shades in this. Buzzkill is a little bit chunky, as well as Dirty Martini, but I really like some of the cool tone like browns in here. And I also like these 2 shimmers I think are really beautiful. So this one I think is nice. I got this in a BoxyCharm. I would not have purchased this for myself. I also got the Natural Matte palette in a BoxyCharm. And I feel like the shades in here are a little bit powdery, like not my fave formula ever. However, I keep this around because it's just so easy to reach into and work with. I mean, really, like this is like a very easy one and done, or a couple shades and you're done sort of look if you're just in a rush to get to work or whatever it might be. But by far, like, wasn't even a question. If I could only choose one palette to keep from Too Faced, it would be the Pumpkin Spice palette. I've really enjoyed this palette. I really like the range of shades that you get within this palette. I think Colourpop, or not Colourpop, I think Too Faced did a nice job of offering a variety of shades. So you have some purples, you have some mauves, you have some warm oranges, you have some pinks, you have the pops of green. I really haven't had any dud shades in this either. Some of the shimmers, like this shade right here, this beautiful green, is a little bit chunkier than I was expecting, but with a glitter glue or with a wet brush, it performs really nicely, and I was really impressed with this one. I've created some really fun looks with this. I feel like you get a lot of versatility with this, and this would absolutely be the one that I keep from Too Faced. All right, we have finally made it to the last brand, which is Urban Decay. I have 3 palettes from Urban Decay. I have the Born to Run palette. I'm sure you guys have seen this palette a million times over. I do really like this palette. However, mine is getting older, and I do think that some shades definitely perform better than others. I really like the warm browns and oranges in here. I also like a lot of the shimmers, but there are some shimmers that I don't think perform that well. For example, Blue Sky. I don't think either of these 2 pink shades perform well, but overall, I think that this is a nice palette. This definitely used to be more of a staple in my collection than it is now. I also picked up the Urban Decay Stone Vibes palette this year. I don't know, there was something about this that I just couldn't say no to. This is a really cool palette. It's really unique. I don't have anything quite like this in my collection. This is more of a complimentary palette. I definitely reach into this more to just choose one of the like shimmer shades or whatever you want to call them. I don't really necessarily know what the formula is called, but I more so reach into this just for one of these shades to pop into a look. But these are really, really unique shades. I love Tiger's Eye. I love Opal Aurora, Vibes, Meditate, Blue, all of the shimmers. I think this is a cool palette. I am really happy to have this in my collection. I do think this adds something to my collection that I didn't have before. I don't personally mind the bulky packaging. I think the packaging is beautiful. But if I could only choose one eyeshadow palette from Urban Decay to keep, it's another one I picked up this year. It's on my eyes today. Can you guys guess what it is? The Naked Honey palette. I purchased the Naked Ultraviolet palette this year and I decluttered that because I was so unimpressed with the quality of that. This is such a good palette. It's so pigmented and so easy to work with. By far, Urban Decay outdid themselves with this palette. I feel like they are a brand where their eyeshadow formula is really hit or miss, but this is so good. If you like rich, warm browns and golds, highly recommend this one. I have never been disappointed any time that I've reached into this, and I continue to get excited to create looks with this. Do all my looks look kind of the same? Yes, but I mean, that's fine with me. All of the shimmers in here are beautiful. I really like all of the like more mustard brown shades, and I just think that this is a really good one from Urban Decay. Definitely the one I would keep if I could only keep one. Whew! I am wondering if this video is going to be an hour long. That is going to wrap it up for today's video, talking about all of the brands that I own 2 or more palettes from and which palette I would keep if I could only keep one. I would love to know what are some of your favorite palettes from some of your favorite brands. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to support my channel, support this video. Again, if you have any content ideas for palette week in the future, leave them down below in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye.